What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the reveal of the number 11 team in my 2019 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this is going to be one of those teams where it's the more things change, the more things stay the same. The entire narrative this offseason has been, okay, well, Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown are gone. The Browns just got Odell Beckham. They showed some excitement with Baker Mayfield. The Baltimore Ravens have Lamar Jackson. He's sick. And Pittsburgh Steelers aren't going to be any good because they didn't make the playoffs last year, and why would they be good this year? Well, this is still a team that has probably the best culture in that division, one of the best cultures in the entire league, probably the second best coach, definitely the best quarterback, depending on how big of a step Baker Mayfield takes up. And it's also a team that's kind of said, okay, we've got Antonio Brown gone, that's fine. Let's, put our heads back to the drawing board and get back to work and start getting back to winning football games. They didn't have Le'Veon Bell last year anyway, so that's not even a loss. That actually opens some things up for this team. So, yeah, I am higher on this Pittsburgh Steelers team. It's a team that a lot of people were calling for as early as like the 20s, which really surprised me that people forget that quickly how good this football team can be. And, you look at this team down the stretch, they beat the Patriots. They, have you ever heard of them? They won the Super Bowl. They played very good against them, and I really think this is a team that was not even that far away from making the playoffs last year, but is a team that's going to surprise a lot of people this upcoming season just because people seem to have forgotten about them with all the hype in this division. So as we go, if you enjoy, if you learn something, please do hit that like button. It's the easiest way to support this channel and share the video. Also subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any more of these deep dives as we approach the top 10. Also, if you want to support the channel, if you're shopping for tickets, head over to SeatGeek, use promo code ThatFranchiseGuy. You'll actually save $20 on your first purchase. You'll help me out and everybody can win. If you're new to the series, what we do here, we go through the roster, we rank each position, how they stack up against the rest of the league. While we do that, I will be showing you my own custom Madden roster. So yes, it is a video game, but it's a nice little graphic to use, and they are ratings that accurately show how I perceive each player. After that, we go through the schedule, we talk about this team's over-under and my win total expectation, and of course, now that we are into the top portion of the league, we got to talk about Super Bowl odds, division odds, playoff odds, all that good stuff, so make sure you stick around till the end of the video. So let's get into it here with the Pittsburgh Steelers. It all starts with the quarterback here, Ben Roethlisberger. Now, coming in here tied for 9th. I've never been someone to pound the table for Big Ben as like that game-breaking elite guy, someone in the same conversation with Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Drew Brees. That's not an insult to Big Ben. He's just never been able to consistently become that level of a quarterback, but he is still an elite guy. He's still, like I said, the best quarterback in this division. About a year, maybe two ago, I was really worried about a drop-off in arm strength as his career continued to go on. I think whatever loss of physical ability he may have had at his old age has kind of, stunted. And yeah, he might not be exactly as able to whip the ball like he did 10 years ago, but he still has a pretty strong arm. And he can still do some of that stuff, shrugging off players as well and extending plays with his feet. So you're obviously not going to have a whole lot of questions about Big Ben. He kind of is what he is. He's a top 10 quarterback. He's a probably first ballot Hall of Famer, and he still plays at a particularly high level. So there's really not a whole lot else to say about Big Ben. It's obviously a big reason I believe in this Steelers team because you have the quarterback situation figured out and you've got the continuity there. Behind him, they drafted Mason Rudolph in the 3rd round last year. I was never a big fan of him. They clearly see him as something like Big Ben, and he really didn't look very good to me in the preseason either. We'll see. Maybe they can continue to develop him. This is one of the best organizations in the NFL at just developing talent, period. So I'm not ready to write him off entirely. I just personally do not believe in Mason Rudolph as the future beyond Big Ben. I see him as a backup type here while they maybe figure that out in the future. And then you also have Josh Dobbs here, a freak athlete type, but they clearly don't believe in him too much as they drafted Mason Rudolph. I don't really have much to say about Josh Dobbs. I'm not expecting a whole lot from him at this point in his career. So tied for 9th at quarterback. We know what Big Ben is, and that's a big part of the optimism I have here for this Pittsburgh Steelers team. Then we've got the running back room here, and this is going to be fun because I love James Conner coming out of the draft. I've got him in like all of my dynasty leagues. I'm a huge fan of James Conner, yet it feels every time I talk about him, I'm battling Pittsburgh Steelers fans who think I hate James Conner. The thing is, I'm not going to project him as something he isn't. I am incredibly impressed by his ability to become an impact in the receiving game. His breakout as a guy that is not a freak athlete is Le'Veon Bell-esque. I think he obviously benefited from, coming into a system that utilizes Le'Veon Bell's patience, power, receiving ability. And James Conner has come in here and really developed and has become a similar player to Le'Veon Bell. Probably not the caliber and probably never will be, but he can be 85% of Le'Veon Bell. But at the same time, he doesn't really have that burst. He's never going to be Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, the only way he could really become Le'Veon Bell is if he continued to develop elite shiftiness and ball carrier vision, which I just don't know if he's going to be able to do that. Le'Veon Bell is incredibly unique. I don't think we've ever seen a running back like Le'Veon Bell. James Conner has his own style. He's a very physical runner. He's got some shiftiness to him, and it's not that he is not a good athlete. He's just not insanely explosive. The thing you do love about him is how he has developed as a receiver. That's something that was a question for him coming out, and that's something that this offense values at an incredibly high rate, is a 3-down back that can be the feature back, not just get 20 carries a game, but catch the ball 5 or 6 times out of the backfield. So they really have that in James Conner, and I think he's going to have a fantastic season. In terms of fantasy football, he'll probably be a top 5 running back, and I'm excited to watch him play. Now, they do come in here tied for 23rd. There's a lot of talented running backs in the NFL right now, and just because of that lack of physical upside, I guess I might be a little lower on James Conner. As far as his production goes, I think he'll be in the top 5 just because this team does nothing but churn out just crazy production from the running back position, and the Steelers have become kind of the pinnacle for the argument that running back just doesn't really matter, because it seems that whoever they put in here, whether it's Bell, James Conner, D'Angelo Williams, even Jalen Samuels played well here. It's kind of just plug and play with this system. So you love what you have in James Conner. And then they also have Jalen Samuels, who we just mentioned. Kind of a similar thing. He's got that full-size, big dude, but he can also catch the ball and run between the tackles. They drafted Benny Snell in the 4th round. Fits the exact same profile. They know what they like at running back, and they stick to it. And they don't invest a lot in it either. 3rd round pick for Conner, 5th round for Samuels, 4th round for Benny Snell. They don't rank very high, and the production's not going to match a ranking of tied for 23rd, but these guys are going to produce because it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then you got Trey Edmonds, Trayvon McMillan, Ralph Webb, and Malik Williams. Don't know if any of those guys are worth talking about, to be completely honest. So let's move on and talk about the wide receiver group here. Obviously, you lose Antonio Brown, one of the 3 or 4 best receivers in the NFL, one of the best receivers to ever play football. Now, you give this Steelers team the utmost benefit of the doubt. Like, this team has been groundbreaking in terms of developing wide receivers. It started with Emmanuel Sanders, and then you had Antonio Brown. You could even make an argument that Mike Wallace and Hines Ward before those guys. And then you had Juju Smith-Schuster here. We've got James Washington, a 2nd-round pick last year, waiting to go. Deontay Johnson, a 3rd-round pick that I loved and fits the absolute style of play that you had in Antonio Brown. So they are going to have a drop-off in terms of the total talent here, but they do still rank tied for 23rd. I am not worried at all about this passing offense, especially given how good this offensive line is. Juju, is he ever going to be a true number 1 Julio Jones, like top 5 wide receiver? That's up for debate. I don't know. I don't know if he has the physical ability to do that in terms of speed and ability to separate. He's a fantastic route runner. He's one of the best contested catch wide receivers in the NFL. He is tough as nails. He is, probably the most physically tough wide receiver in the NFL right now, that, at least with a combination of physical toughness and mental toughness. Like, he wants to block. He wants to jump over you and come down with catches. And his game speed certainly does not match his slower 40 time. So, Juju, to me, is going to be a low-end number one wide receiver. Production-wise, he should have a very good season because it's a, kind of what we said about the running back. It's a great organization in place here. I don't want to say it's a great system in place because I don't think that Big Ben or Juju are, system players. They're both very good players in their own right, but I'm not ready to put Juju into that, elite conversation just yet. We'll see what other tricks he has up his sleeve, but right now I consider him a low-end number one, high-end number two. And then behind him, we mentioned those two young guys. It's going to be a question of who and if these guys step up. You got James Washington, a second-round pick last year. My evaluation on him, he's a bit of an awkward player. He did kind of struggle as a rookie. We'll see what he can do in year two here. When I say he's an awkward player, he's built kind of like a running back. He's more of a straight line runner than a quick kind of guy, but he also happens to have some of the best pair of hands and catch and traffic ability, or at least he did in college. But, you just look at him in pads, and he looks like Jordan Howard. So he's just kind of a weird-looking guy. He's not the fastest dude either, but there is a certain toughness about him, and he's kind of like Juju Smith-Schuster in that way. And then you have Deontay Johnson, who's a little different. Very, slender, quick guy. He's much more physically similar to Antonio Brown. This was, to me, one of the best picks in the entire draft. He's a guy that I certainly am looking to add in all of my, dynasty fantasy football drafts. I think, he is the guy I'm looking at to be this team's Emmanuel Sanders, dare I say Antonio Brown. It's very unlikely he ever becomes the player Antonio Brown is, but you get the point. He could totally just break out and be a star player in this league. He has all of the tools to do that. Fantastic route runner, great after the catch. I don't have any doubts about his hands, even though he did have some drops in college, but drops to me, it's not really a big deal to me. Like, honestly, I want you to get open. That's really the big thing for me for wide receivers. So you got three guys there. They do sign Dante Moncrief. I'm not talking about Dante Moncrief. He's a red zone threat. That's all he is. You also have Ryan Switzer. He's that prototype slot wide receiver. You got Eli Rogers. Same thing about him. Both these guys are going to push James Washington and Deontay Johnson, and I'm sure we will see some combination of all six of those guys. So they have probably a deeper wide receiver than they have going back to the team they had when they had Sanders, Wallace, Brown, Hines Ward, even though they might not have the superstar power, but they just might in Juju Smith-Schuster. They also finagled Johnny Holton in here. He was a guy that made my list of breakout players last year for the Raiders. Really good athlete, a deep threat. My guess is they see him as the replacement to whatever role Darius Hayward-Bay had here. So maybe he makes the team and can carve out a very minor role on this team as well. And then at tight end, Vance McDonald really impressed last year down the stretch. He was always criticized for his blocking. Pittsburgh gets him, and they teach him how to block. Just kind of shows you what kind of toughness this organization and culture has, and is just another player that makes you give this team the benefit of the doubt with a lot of players from a developmental standpoint. So Vance McDonald, not just one of the better blocking tight ends in the NFL nowadays, but he has shown really great run after the catch ability. In terms of a route runner and his hands, they're fine. But he's got a couple great, traits about him now. And he is now going to be the number one tight end here with Jesse James gone. And Vance McDonald, I think, could actually be a bit of a breakout candidate here in Pittsburgh. With the departure of the targets from not just Jesse James, but Antonio Brown, he could become a much bigger part of this passing offense. Then you have Xavier Grimble behind him. He's kind of just a tight end 2, tight end 3. They took Zach Gentry in the 5th round. Bigger blocker guy, kind of like a Kyle Rudolph type, who you just hope can be a blocker. He's never really going to be an elite separator in the NFL. Maybe he can be a red zone threat. And that's really it for the tight ends. So, the wide receiver group is very deep this year. They've had to throw a few extra darts at this position just because Antonio is gone and you are missing some of that elite production at the wide receiver room. So they're going to move some of these guys around. They're going to get a little more creative, but I do think things are going to function just fine with this offense. It does not have the upside that it once did. There's no doubt about that. With Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, and Big Ben, the 3Bs, right? This was one of the 5 best offenses in the NFL. It probably doesn't have that upside anymore, but it's not that those losses are so dramatic that you just completely forget about this offense either. And a big part of that, too, is this offensive line. They come in 10th. Everyone's just basically a year older. They did lose Marcus Gilbert at right tackle. Was just kind of his time. Still played pretty well last year. But this team was not really in a position to pay him, especially given their resume in terms of developing linemen. So you do have Matt Filer there at right tackle, set to start. He's been kind of the guy they've been developing. Now you do obviously have to mention the loss of their offensive line coach, Mike Munchak. You might have questions about their ability to continue to develop these guys down the stretch. Another situation where you give this team the benefit of the doubt. But as far as we are concerned right now, these guys are all very good players, and they have something established here within this scheme, and they're going to be just fine, I think, this year. So, got Villanueva at left tackle. He's a top 10 to 15 tackle. You got Ramon Foster at left guard. He played very well last year. He's a bit of an older player, though. You got to hope he doesn't regress at his age. You got Marquise Pouncey. Has just been a rock at center since they drafted him outside of injuries. David DeCastro, one of the 3 best guards, if not just in general linemen in the NFL. So from left tackle to right guard, you are set. It's going to help a guy like Matt Filer, who has played at a decent level when they've called his name. He should be set to be a serviceable right tackle, even if it's not what you once had in Gilbert. And then this team has done a good job to bring in depth as well. They took Chukwuma Okorafor in the 3rd round, athletic tackle who's just a guy that's going to develop. He might compete at right tackle with Matt Filer as well. They also took Gerald Hawkins in the 4th round in 2016. They're probably pretty confident in his ability to step up at some point. You got B.J. Finney at center. He can play. It's one of the rare offensive lines in the NFL that actually has depth. So you factor in the loss of Gilbert, you factor in the loss of Mike Munchak, it's still a top 10 offensive line and is going to come in that tier of offensive lines that is going to help this team do what they want to do, as opposed to getting in their way or just simply allowing them to do what they want to do. It is going to help them be a very good offense. So the offense as a whole comes in tied for 9th. Like we said, probably doesn't have that elite upside that it once had with Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown, but they still have a hell of a lot to work with here. They have an established culture and track record. I think this offense is going to be just fine. And that's if you don't get Juju emerging as DeAndre Hopkins or, James Conner just being ridiculous Le'Veon Bell-esque type of tackle breaker, or Deontay Johnson becomes Emmanuel Sanders. Tied for 9th is just with how I perceive these guys right now. There is some upside with how this team has been able to develop players for this team to be even better than tied for 9th. So I really do not worry about this offense. It's a clear reason why I'm comfortable ranking this team as the best team in the AFC North, why I am comfortable saying that people are just forgetting about this team because they lost a couple star players. The NFL isn't just about 1 or 2 players. It's about a culture and a full set of, 22 guys. And the Steelers got a bunch of guys here. And then we transition over to the defense here, and I don't think anyone's going to sit here and pound the table and say that the Pittsburgh Steelers have some elite defense. But the one thing I will say is that last year was the first time, really since Ryan Shazier got hurt, that this defense kind of caught my attention and really seemed legit. Not elite, but just legit. And, they really dominated the Patriots late in that season. And that is a game that you might point to about that. But where it all starts for me is this front 7. The run defense here is ridiculous. It's tied for 7th. Just the interior defensive linemen, the guys they have here, it's really hard to block these guys. Javon Hargrave as the nose. Stephon Tuitt's a total stud. Cameron Hayward, someone you don't really hear a lot about, but he's one of the more underrated players in the league. They even have Tyson Alualu who can stop the run. They draft Isaiah Buggs in the 6th round. They just added Devin Bush. Vince Williams, a good run defender. They're going to be very good against the run. That's one thing this team has consistently done very well over the last few years. But one thing that has kind of changed here for this team, at least the way I perceive them, And maybe I was just wrong. Some Steelers fans had been telling me before this year that their pass rush is better than I'm giving them credit, and I ended up being proved wrong about that because, for one, just those guys we just mentioned on the interior, Tuitt and Cam Hayward, to me, that's where it all starts. Like, you really have to draw a lot of attention from those guys as they're just elite pile drivers, and they both come into that, not tier 1 elite, right? They're not Aaron Donald or Fletcher Cox by any means, but they're in that cluster of like 15 to 20 interior guys that will get you 50 pressures a year, which is very good for an interior defensive lineman. They're both 3-down interior defenders. Javon Hargrave is more of that traditional nose tackle, who's not much of a pass rusher, but the fact that they have two guys like Tuitt and Hayward really allows them to move everyone else around, and it's kind of the same thing that the Ravens have with Brandon Williams and Michael Pierce. So they're kind of just replicating that, because once you have those two just nasty, big-bodied interior guys, you can move athletic guys around like Bud Dupree, like TJ Watt. You can run a lot of zone blitzes that can cause a lot of mayhem and really generate a good pass rush despite not having an elite edge guy, because I don't think TJ Watt's an elite edge guy. He's a very good player. I think he's a high-end number 2 guy. I'm sure there's Steelers fans that consider him a top 10 edge rusher, maybe. I don't know where Steelers fans sit on him. I know he would be one of my favorite Steelers if I was a Steelers fan. He's a fun player to watch. He's super athletic. He's J.J. Watt's brother, all that. You know, he's a fine player. He doesn't seem to have a really crafty pass rushing game. He doesn't have a ton of power as a bull rusher. You know, he's just kind of solid. And then Bud Dupree has been, considered a bust here, but he's carved out a role here as, we keep comparing it to the Ravens defense, but he's very similar to like what Zadarius Smith has done for that team, where he can just kind of use that, explosiveness and power as a rusher to at least push the pile. Sometimes that might not result in a ton of sacks because you get locked into your block, but it does open up a lot of things for blitzing linebackers or a guy like TJ Watt, who's kind of just flying all over the place. So you like what you have in this pass rush. You don't have that elite guy, and I don't see any of the depth here. Anthony Chickalo, Olasunkanmi Adeniyi, I don't see these guys becoming elite. So it is going to come in 20th, but that's higher than I ranked them last year. It's a respectable pass rush to be certain. It gets a grade of 81. If it was an 82, it would come in tied for 14th. So it's right in there in the middle in terms of very solid, serviceable pass rushes. Will be interesting, too, to see what they do with Sutton Smith. Seems he's going to be converting to off-ball, which is fine. He's undersized and probably should do that. But I would be curious to see if they want to use him as a 3-4 outside linebacker at any times, because he does have an elite pass rushing skill set with crazy bend. He's one of the most productive college pass rushers ever. So, that's a good transition here to linebacker. But keep an eye on Sutton Smith, the 6th-round pick that was a really great college player, but is really just undersized for his position. He's going to make a position change here to inside linebacker. But he's obviously not going to start at inside linebacker because you got Vince Williams, who had a very solid season last year. It's rare for a guy in his 6th season to break out like that, but he really impressed. But not enough to say that he's a true number 1 linebacker. This team traded up and actually gave up a good bit to go and get Devin Bush. And this is going to give this team that Ryan Shazier replacement, that sideline-to-sideline elite athlete, the captain of the defense, that potentially elite second-level defender. And there were people that would have told you that Devin Bush was better than Devin White. I actually really loved Blake Cashman and had Blake Cashman, who was a 5th-round pick for the Jets, very close to Devin Bush. But that's besides the point. It's not that I didn't think Devin Bush was a very good player. And it's certainly not that I don't think he's going to be a great impact on this team, even if that was a lot to give up, and I might not have personally done it myself. But getting that just, rock in the middle who can be everything for this team that they have lacked desperately since Ryan Shazier got hurt, it is really going to help this defense out, and I think push them at least into that top 20 range. You also bring in Mark Barron, converted safety, cover, 3rd down linebacker. That's fine. We'll see if he takes some reps away from Vince Williams on 3rd downs. You got Tyler Matakevich, T. Gray Scales, actually an undrafted player I liked last year. Maybe he can figure something out. You got Ulysses Gilbert, a 6th-round pick, and Sutton Smith. So they are really desperately trying to fix this linebacker room. You got 4 new bodies in here between those 2 rookies. Actually, 3 rookies. They spent 3 draft picks on rookie inside linebackers, and then they signed Mark Barron. So it should be much improved at middle linebacker. And I think it really is going to boost this defense up from what it was last year, and is going to be a pretty big reason I'm optimistic about this team. Is just the front 7 in general is going to be a great strength for this team. Now, the secondary is incredibly suspect, and if there are people that think I'm too high on this team, your best case is going to be saying they can't cover anyone. Joe Hayden's their best corner. He's a year older. He's not what he used to be to begin with. You do have some questions about what he is as your best corner. He's not bad by any means, but I would be much more comfortable if he was my number 2 cover guy, and I didn't rely on him to be my number 1 corner against the best receivers in this league. And then opposite Joe Hayden, they signed Steven Nelson. It's an upgrade from Artie Burns, who just has not worked out here. We've spent a lot of time praising this team's ability to develop talent, but where they have really been incapable of doing that is in the secondary here, and I think Steelers fans would agree with that. But, Chiefs fans, I don't think are really going to miss Steven Nelson. He's fine. They draft Justin Lane in the 3rd round. He's a little more of a raw, physical press corner out of Michigan State. Potential there with Justin Lane, but I'm not giving this team the benefit of the doubt when it comes to developing a guy like that. You love what you have in Mike Hilton in the nickel. Definitely a stud. He's one of the best 10 nickel corners in the NFL. He's on his way, I think, to a very nice payday. Certainly one of the best bargains in the NFL, a $645,000 cap hit this season. And then you look at the safeties. Sean Davis, total freak athlete, finally some of that transition to okay play last year. You hope he can continue to develop because they're really hoping on him to be that free safety here. That's suspect, but I don't hate Sean Davis, and he's in a contract year here, so maybe he can figure out some consistency there. I don't necessarily hate that. Then Terrell Edmonds, a 1st-round pick last year, was just kind of a miserable pick. I had a 5th-round grade on him. Most people had day 3 grades on him. Really shocked a lot of people, and he certainly did not live up to that 1st-round, expectation. Now they let Morgan Burnett go, and he's really going to have the reins and the opportunity to prove a lot of people wrong this year. But I'm certainly not counting on that. I'm cheering for him. He seems like a great dude. He's a fun athlete. We'll see how that works out. I'm seeing Cameron Sutton being listed as a safety. Looks like they're trying to convert him after he hasn't really worked out at corner either. I don't see him really starting here. Marcus Allen, a 5th-round pick last year out of Penn State. I did like him. He could compete here. I don't see him really winning out any of those jobs. Maybe in like dime packages, though. You see Davis and Allen up high and Terrell Edmonds down there in the box a little more. And that's really it for the secondary. There's not a ton of depth, not a ton of talent I'm overly excited about here. The thing you're most hoping for is that these guys that you've invested in can finally reach their potential. Artie Burns, Terrell Edmonds, Sean Davis, all 1st or 2nd round picks that have not lived up to that pedigree. But at the end of the day, I just don't think it's going to be a good secondary at all. I think they're going to be able to disguise a lot of these weaknesses with a very good front 7, but with a defensive back ranking of tied for 28th, the 18th defense in the NFL. If this team's going to be a Super Bowl team, it is probably going to be on the heels of Big Ben and this offense as a whole. But I do think this defense has the potential to just be, a top 20 defense that doesn't let opponents, blow the roof off of them like the Jaguars did, scoring 45 points against them a couple years ago. It's a better defense than they had back then, though the offense isn't as good. So, a slightly different version of the Steelers team. Some things have changed, but a lot has stayed the same here as well. And you obviously are going to rank the culture here pretty high on both sides of the ball. They've really earned the benefit of the doubt, especially on offense. The offensive coaching culture coming in here tied for 8th. Defensive coaching culture, Mike Tomlin at the end of the day is still a defensive guy. He's got a lot more to work with here. Maybe if that front 7 can be a top 10 front 7, you do see guys like Artie Burns and Sean Davis become quality starters, and you could get this defense into the top 10. though I don't consider that very likely. So let's finish up here and look at the schedule here. This is going to surprise a lot of people. Very, very favorable schedule for me. They do have a rough start at New England, Seattle at home, at San Francisco. I've got them going 1-2 there, but this is a team that, they're not going to panic because they start 1-2. They certainly are not, especially when they see the end of their schedule and what that looks like. So they got Cincinnati at home after that, Baltimore at home. They do have to go to the Chargers. Don't expect them to win that. Then they have Miami at home. So I've got them at 4-3. A huge pivotal game here, really two pivotal games at home against Indianapolis and the Rams. When I say it's an easy schedule, that's really what I point to, is getting those two games at home as opposed to having to go to those stadiums. They do go to Cleveland after that divisional game, and then I have them ripping off 6 straight wins against pretty poor opponents. Cleveland's good, but they get them at home. At Arizona won't necessarily be easy. Neither will at Baltimore or at the Jets. Those are all question marks. So, this is best case scenario with a 12-4 projection. But for me, worst case for this team is 8 wins. Their over-under is 9. To me, this is, next to the 49ers, the best bet that I can tell people to make right now. If the 49ers are my NFC hard prediction, the Steelers here are my AFC hard prediction. I feel very confident in this, in being a pretty hot take here at 12-4. I think they will go at worst 10 wins here in Pittsburgh. They just have way too many things, heading in the positive direction after a lot of things went wrong for this team last year. And they've certainly earned the benefit of the doubt, and the schedule really is kind of a joke. So I've got them going 12-4, which, you do have to talk about their Super Bowl odds at that point. This is a team that can win a Super Bowl. We've seen it before, twice with Big Ben. If this defense can get some guys to step up, be a top 16 defense, and this offense can be a top 10 offense, there is no reason, especially if they get home field advantage, winning 12 football games, there's no reason they can't go to the Super Bowl, and once you get in, you can definitely win it. The best bet to me, though, is plus 190 to win the division. You are totally capitalizing on people writing this team off because of a loss of Antonio Brown, basically, and the hype surrounding the Cleveland Browns. To me, to say the Pittsburgh Steelers are still not the favorite to win this division makes no sense to me. You get them at 2-1. I have already made this bet myself. And I have to throw in, because I'm really encouraging this right now, to gamble responsibly. We're a family-friendly channel here on YouTube, and they are really against sports gambling, even though it's legal in America right now. So just got to throw that in there. That is it, Steelers fans. Let me know, am I crazy? Do you not think your team's going to be this good? The rest of you NFL fans, let me hear it as well. Really excited to hear what you guys think about this one, because I do feel pretty confident in the Steelers surprising a lot of people this year. So cheers as always. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you for the next one. Peace out.